And so I had to do some deep breathing exercises to let go of the stress. So, because, that the situation that I was thinking about really bothered me. So, it was so unusual for me to react that way. And it was kind of strong. Like it was a really strong sensation that went to my arm, which was a stressful feeling.
And you put your attention on your arms, and that helped, and along with the breathing. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it did. Yeah, the stress went away. Yeah.
Beautiful. So I wanted to share some information about why these things are in our bodies and how they work.
Stephanie, do you want to
So,
talk to Melissa at all or no? She's
pardon?
the second person with a hand up if you wanted to.
Yeah, actually, let's do that. Let's do that. Let's take the. Thank you, Nettie. That was beautiful.
Okay.
And Melissa, you're up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Well, the first time I felt it in my jaw, and then for some reason, while we were doing it, it moved to my back. And then afterwards, it was like the emotion was gone. There was still a little tension in my jaw, but I know I always hold things in my jaw. And then with the sleep, it was so deep, but then I started feeling something in my head, like a headache.
This is all great. All right, so this is all great. So jaw to back, the jaw became less, the tension released. Let's deal with that. So that was with the bracketing. Beautiful. So like I said, you start off in one area and then you go to another area spontaneously. And the jaw wasn't 100% released, but it's something that's been going on for a long time, but it was less, and the tension released. So this is an example of something that's very, very common in bracketing, where our attention is drawn to different things, and one step by step, we're uncovering and releasing the layers. Congratulations, it was beautiful.
And one of the things, I mean, the sleep was really nice, but I was wondering, and I think I felt like I should bracket the headache. Should I?
You could.
Okay.
No, during this quantum sleep, we don't try to bracket.
Okay.
We don't try to notice. It's like, it's a different technique. But it's a good impulse. If you have a headache, you can clear headaches with bracketing. And I've cleared people's headaches with bracketing. I've cleared people's migraines, and not just in the moment, but their tendency to have migraines and things like that. It's just applying this beautiful, powerful, transformative evolutionary field that's simply there all the time behind our awareness. And we're just sort of taking it to where our attention is placed, and it does stuff. So it's like you bring the attention there, the quantum does stuff. It's fantastic. So, Melissa, the headache could have had, let's say there's a couple of reasons why that may be there. One is if you were trying at a time when you were, part of you was wanting to relax and you were also trying at the same time, creating tension. I don't think that was it. I think that what happens is sometimes pain comes up in the process of release. Now, it's also true that pain comes up to get our attention. So if you had the pain and you had the thought of quantum bracketing, then it's possible that the head was saying, okay, put your attention on me. And yes, in that case, bracketing, if you still have the situation, calling your attention there. But it's very often that when you're in the process of release, sometimes things get stronger before they get quieter. So I would say it was something good is happening, and it's wonderful that it is. I can't interpret it from my side. If I honed in and did some attention on your head, I might get some insights, but that's not what this is about. You now are empowered to do the quantum bracketing yourself. I haven't taught people how to lead quantum sleep. I've brought people through it. I haven't learned that piece yet. And so I'm not going to expect you to go and do quantum sleeps on your own. It's probably more for people who've been practicing bracketing for some time, and then to use that comfortable connection with the quantum and bring someone down with them. But some of you, I'm saying it for some of you who may already have that experience and capacity. But what you do have is the quantum bracketing. So let's talk about.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for your, and I'm going to respond to several of the things that have been coming up. Why are these things in the body? What are they? These are subtle anatomy pieces. Okay. So let's say in my book, Claiming Your Magic, which will be out in the fall, I hope. I have an example, and I named a girl Natalie. So Natalie, as a child, when she spoke up, her angry dad would jump on her and yell. Not jump on her physically, but just yell. And that's a stand-in for all the kind of traumas that people have as a kid. So at 3 years old or 5 years old or 2 years old, Natalie has an experience of her primary caregiver getting angry, which to a 2 or 3 year old could be a survival issue. It's like the world is collapsing, etc. And there's judgments and there's decisions being made at that time. The judgment is it's not safe to speak up. Maybe my life depends on it. The decision is don't speak up. And this is a very uncomfortable feeling. Don't let this happen again. So that's a decision made by 2-year-old Natalie. Now, what happens is the emotions of that reaction to being yelled at become sort of walled off and stuck somewhere in the body. It's like too much to deal with. I don't want to deal with it. Gets walled off. So we have unprocessed emotions somewhere in our subtle body and in our psyche. We have that 2-year-old Natalie in reaction to those emotions, and she gets kind of frozen in place, and she's that little girl, inner little girl that's there all the time, that's in this state of reactivity. But there's a decision, don't let this happen again. So imagine these cartoon characters of sentries or guardians that say, okay, boss, we're not going to let this happen again. And so they create personality structures. They create alarms. It's like, do not speak up. Do not speak up. So if there's a situation where the person has to speak in public, there's flushing of the face, there's fear. It's like, it's a life-threatening thing to speak up. Now, this is part of the decision made as a 2-year-old or a 1-year-old or 3-year-old. And there's imagine these cartoon characters, like our job as loyal supporters of Natalie's life is to not let her speak up, not let her be heard, to keep small. That all gets shoved down into the subconscious. The conscious Natalie, as an adult, is having a heck of a time. She wants to speak up. She wants to be seen, but she has been scared and hiding for decades. So she wants to go this direction. I want to speak up. And there's a subconscious part that's going in this direction. Stay quiet. And the subconscious part is interfering with her conscious desire to speak up and finally be heard. So this is where a lot of us are in having programs that were created in the past. And we have these loyal sentries inside us working 24/7 on our behalf in the wrong direction. So in quantum reprogramming, it's possible to take the opposite directions and turn them both in the same direction, so that both the subconscious part and the conscious part are saying, okay, it's time to speak up. It's like creating a connection between the conscious and the subconscious. And the subconscious was originally there taking orders from 2-year-old Natalie. Natalie is still the boss. But now that Natalie's older, Natalie doesn't have the way to reach that program. So using quantum bracketing and a number of other techniques, that we've taught, the conscious mind can access and get in touch with the subconscious part and make that change. And what happens is, among other things, when that program gets put in place, the whole subtle body anatomy responds to that decision. Don't speak up. The throat chakra, which is for expressive, it may end up with some kind of block. Some other types of blocks may happen in different parts of the body. We may have a block in the arm. We may have a block in the back. We may have a block in our heart. These are part of the subtle body anatomy and the new way that the energy flows, and parts that have been blocked off, unprocessed, and isolated. So now one way to deal with this is simply quantum bracketing of the physical location that you're drawn to. And for those with subtle perception, they may see a density, they may see a block, they may see 2-year-old Natalie. So I can get a sense of someone's inner child, and I can apply quantum bracketing and see the release of those emotions, see the discharge of that walled off emotion like a dam breaking and those emotions leaving. Watch Natalie grow from a 2-year-old to the adult that she is. See the centuries become reprogrammed and now follow a new program, following a new instruction. This is why in a single session, quantum reprogramming can break through patterns that people have had trouble with and struggling with for decades, because it's dealing with the actual subtle physical and psychic mechanism that's working in the wrong direction and shifting it around so it works in the right direction. And when people have that shift, it happens like boom, when all of a sudden the program is rewritten, and I can watch, and it's like I asked someone, what's going on? Because I usually say to someone, as soon as that happens, I say, just close your eyes and watch or feel. And someone said, it feels like the furniture is being moved around, reorganized. And that's what it is. It's like there's a change in the subtle structures, there's change in the energy, breath starts to flow. Sometimes the area which has been walled off now is starting to connect and integrate with other areas or different chakras. So there's a whole reorganizing that can occur when these programs are rewritten. Now, I teach a course in quantum reprogramming, and it's many hours and there's many techniques, but a simple shortcut is what we've already learned. And that is, find out where in the body your reaction is. We were talking to you, Deb, and you said you really have a dislike for this person. It may be that that's the person that caused the dislike, but it might also be kind of ringing a bell of something that happened to you 20 years ago, 30 years ago when you were a kid. It could be a structural, systematic response, and this person just happens to fit right there. Now, that structure is there, and some people can find stuff in their body. Yours, you don't have that experience of finding stuff in your body, but others we've spoken to have. To find it in your body, allow the light touch awareness to be there, and then notice the shifts. Now, in terms of noticing shifts, people have different experiences because they have different ways of seeing. For some, it's all physiological. It's all sensation. For some, it's all emotion. A few people have can see with their eyes and see, like the kind of people that see fairies or whatever, or see aura. There's people that can hear. What I use is what I call repurposed imagination, where someone described it after I was using it. Their theory was that the wiring of the brain for the intuition is the same place as the imagination. I don't know if that's true, but it made sense to me, because what I can do as I was holding space as you were watching and watching an individual with my bracketing is I was just dedicating my own imagination, screen of the imagination, to provide me with information that was relevant and appropriate and true that I could react to, that I could identify. So in that repurposed imagination, I might notice a structure, I might notice an emotion, I might get a sentence or whatnot. And when you're dealing with repurposed imagination, it's very easy to doubt. Like, well, it's just my imagination. Maybe I'm just making it up. I had the good fortune that when my subtle perception awakened in 1993, I was working every day doing healings with a woman, and we were both getting these downloads about what to do. It was like the manual was downloading. We were trying all these different things. And we'd often work in complete silence and then compare notes and say, well, what did you see? And because we always saw the same thing, I never doubted. It was an incredibly great opportunity for me to figure out that I was seeing things accurately. And an example that I write in my book, one day we were together and I just noticed that there was this subtle object in my hand. Couldn't see it with my hand, with my eyes, but I knew what it was because it was right there. I knew exactly where it was in my hand, and it was a pink flower. And I said to my friend, "What's in my hand?" She looked over and said, "Pink flower." Not random, not coincidence, but an example of the kind of validation that was so helpful for me when I was learning these things over 30 years ago. Now, we don't always have someone who's noticing the same thing. So here's a recommendation in terms of subtle perception, whether it's in terms of feeling or emotions or sensations, or you feel it in your body instead of the other person's body. There's a tendency to go, well, I'm not sure if it's true. And that skepticism is okay. Especially we have a context that we're going to do it in. We have the specific perception. We make an interpretation of that perception, and then we have an action based on that. Now, I may look at someone and see, okay, there's a structure here in their heart or whatever, or you may notice there's a tension there. But you may think, well, I'm going to get the interpretation wrong. I'm not sure what it is. And we'll almost diss our own perception because we're not sure of the interpretation or the action. Here's my suggestion. Be bold in whatever perception you have. It's like if you say, I have this really subtle feeling of anger or a really subtle feeling of such and such, and that's okay. Be bold in that. Apply skepticism for interpretation and even more for action, because you may be wrong. You may be getting information that's mixed up with your own triggers, with your own projections, with what you had for breakfast. You don't know. And so it's okay to have skepticism about the interpretation. It's a good idea. And to have hesitation about taking action on it. But don't let those interfere with how bold you are about this is what I'm getting. Even if it's just wispy and mild and subtle, you put your attention on that and acknowledge it as wispy and subtle, and that helps feed the mechanism of perception, because you're not backing away from that. You're not saying, well, I'm not sure, so I'm not even going to name it. I'm not going to describe it. I'm not going to own it because I'm not sure. The perception itself, own it. It may be your own projection. It may be coincidental. That's okay. But own it as this is what I'm getting. This is what I'm noticing, feeling, seeing, sensing, whatever. So that's my recommendation. We went through a lot just now. We went through quantum reprogramming. We went through how our attention, quantum bracketing, can help release some of those programs. And we talked about subtle perception. And before that, we learned quantum bracketing and experienced quantum sleep. So before I go on to the next discussion, I'd like to give an opportunity for anyone to ask a question. And I'm going to ask Michael, if you can monitor the chat or the Q&A so you can name people's questions. People can also raise their hand and we can hear their question.
Absolutely. Okay, so if you have a question, you can either raise your hand, as Jeffrey just said, or you can go ahead and put it in the chat and I'll read it out and see where we're at.
In fact, it is Q&A time officially.
It
Just
is
noticed.
good. Well, you can take as much time as you want to, with this. So there's no like hard fast rules. All right.
Okay.
So we got Antonio. Give me 1 second here. Okay, Antonio, go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, sir. When we are focusing on the awareness, you can say that this is the divinity, or how can we relate it with that?
That's a great question. Divinity versus the quantum and whatnot. So if you think about physics, Antonio, and physics says this unmanifest field gives rise to everything. And actually, if you look at the structure of our bodies, it's 99.9% empty space. And my friend Bruce Lipton talks about there's something like nano tornado-like forces in the matter that cause it to actually be solid, and that it reflects, which causes it to be not invisible, or you can see. So if you really saw it the way it was, it would be almost all empty space. And if you looked at the particles that weren't empty space, that was the particles created by this quantum field, little fluctuations going in and out of the quantum. So that's the world from the perspective of quantum physics. So where is divinity in this? Well, one of my mentors, Bill Bauman, talks about some people will take the quantum and then they will personalize it and give it characteristics and turn it into more of a being, and that may be the truth of things, or it may be that the quantum is the way the divine works. My experience is that there are different levels of creation, just as we talked about from physical to molecular and whatnot. There's also subtler levels like maybe the angelic world or whatnot. And my experience is that there are things that seem to be full of worlds that seem to be full of light and power and love and whatnot. And that I like to call those the divine levels, where the quantum in my experience is that field of pure consciousness. But I give you, we all have our own experiences and opinions, and that's just my experience and my opinion. So I don't have a authoritative answer for you in this. Just we both can let us sort of like scratch our heads and say, so how does all this work? And I do sense that one of the techniques that I use helps open people up to what I call the divine levels, so that their higher selves become more available, the divine experiences become more available. We've run that through the EEG. I did that for someone while they were connected with the EEG, and it was like off the charts. And a lot of these things, whole changes in the particular brain waves that I'm told are related to these higher experiences. But it's a question that I leave. I answer my own experience, but I sort of leave the deeper answer to you.
Okay, thank you, sir. I don't know if I can make another question.
Sure.
Yes. Okay. Well, I don't know if you know Ramana Maharshi.
I've heard of Ramana Maharshi. I know a lot about Vedic science, but not his particular interpretations. Go on.
Yes. How can we sense that this person is a saint, or how can we make a discussion about what some persons have this particular explosion of divinity in self, and not another people. I don't know if you
So,
can say something about it. Thank you, sir.
you know, it's hard for, like, I can't say, well, this person is a saint or has a particular access point that other people don't have. I don't want to be in that position to be judging people, and I don't happen to have that skill. But here's my one thing that I do want to talk about in terms of individual superpowers and individual makeups. In Vedic science, which I studied with Maharshi Mahesh Yogi for many years, and there's different interpretations of it all. The version that I looked at was non-religious. He talked about the field, that quantum field, as the home of all the laws of nature. And that in ancient times, awakened rishis, rishi means seer, transcended and experienced the quantum field, but were able to keep their senses awake. And what they saw and what they heard and what they experienced were the laws of nature. And that those laws of nature came in a certain form, certain words, certain sounds. But individuals who were the rishis, they looked at and saw the laws of nature that were predominant in their systems. So one cognized the laws of nature around health. And in Vedic science, that's Ayurveda. One did about architecture, one did about mathematics, one did about the stars and all. It's like they had those laws of nature lively in them. And when they transcended with their superpower awakenedness, they saw those laws of nature related to their own experience and wrote them down, and they became fields of study. Now, what I take away from that is that we all have certain laws of nature that are very lively for us. Some people are extremely compassionate. Some like to organize. Some are in terms of being very grounded. Some in terms of being expansive. And to me, I feel like just as the quantum will sort out certain laws of nature to create a tree, certain laws of nature to create water, certain laws of nature to create whatever, when it creates us individually, there's certain laws of nature which come in more concentrated form that is kind of like our special qualities, but I also like to call them our superpowers, because I feel like that's where we touch source with the greatest bandwidth. That's where we bring more of the quantum reality when we're aligned with that which is our footprint, our special nature. And so when I think in terms of who a person is that might be a saint or a superhero, it's going to be different for different people. And one thing that I've done for a long time is help people acknowledge and own with authority, it's an interesting word, and permission and power, their own superpower, their own qualities that they are here to bring forth, which may be very specific to them, as opposed to looking at others and trying to be like others. And I feel like that is a critical, for some people, it is a critical step in their growth. Not everyone, but for some people, that kind of ownership is. And so my response, Antonio, is for me, I don't like to rate people in terms of whatnot, but I'm just looking at people and I have a sense sometimes when when I'm invited to help them identify, discover, and own with a greater capacity their special powers.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right, so we have a couple of questions from the audience in the chat. Can this cause emotions to change as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So there are so many things that can cause emotions to change. All right, so you have the subconscious, the stored emotions that are unprocessed, stuck in the body. They're sort of designed to be walled off, but it's leaky, so you get this kind of reaction through your life, and you're dealing with whatever it is. And when this clears, sometimes that chronic emotion or chronic condition is gone, and the emotions are different. So I was reading earlier a comment from someone I worked on over Zoom who was connected to EEG, and he said, my gratification quotient, which was a name of a particular EEG analysis, a measure of my nervous system's capacity to naturally enjoy life, rose by 60.71%. In parallel, the quote, need to do something to regulate mood dropped by over 61%, showing a meaningful shift toward effortless joy. And that was his experience. He had a shift towards effortless joy from a 5-minute and 2-second total session, and his emotional experience changed. I've worked on thousands of people, and emotions are one of the primary things that transform. And sometimes, very often, people come and say, it completely changed my life. Now, it's not just that. I will describe some more advanced work. Someone came to a group that I was working with, and she was an empath, very, very sensitive, highly sensitive, but not stable. And her life was, she said it was like overwhelmed by other people's emotions. And it was, she was suffering for years and years. And I said, well, we could manifest around your body a filter to soften other people's energies. And you can, in fact, give me the qualities of it. So she gave me the qualities of it. It was reflecting back her own joy, and it allowed through its filter the positive emotions and not the negative. And we designed it all. And then I teach this in the quantum desiring and manifestation course. We held space, and I could watch it form. It's like an egg around the body. She goes, whoa, I feel so different. So she left, and then a year later, she came back to another circle I was holding and said, oh, Jeffrey, I've been thinking about you so much this year. You totally changed my life. It was amazing. I was not overcome with all these different emotions. And after about half a year, I decided to see what it'd be like to dismantle it. So I took it down, and then it was miserable again. And I'm thinking, why didn't you call me? So we put it together again. Now, why is this possible? Well, the subtle body responds to consciousness, intention, emotions, decisions. Remember we talked about the story of Natalie, who her system was like, don't act up, don't speak up. A whole bunch of things happened. The throat chakra got clogged. The face got flushed when she was, all these physical things and subtle physical things happen as a result already spontaneously without our awareness as a result of our emotions and decisions. So what we're doing is saying, okay, if they happen anyway, let's do it consciously. And so there's a way to use quantum bracketing to manifest in real time. And I did something with a person, an adult who was autistic, and he set up a system of dials where he can dial down or dial up the level of intensity, and it completely changed his life. And we're looking now for any number of adult autistic people who are suffering from overwhelm, who can speak and communicate their experience, because we want to replicate what I did with Mark. And if we get two or three more, then I want to do a pre and post test study with a large cohort, because if this is something that can be used by the autistic community, it's amazing, because he's really had an amazing experience. So I see someone volunteering. go to highestversionofyourself.com, send a note, it'll get to me. And we're specifically looking for autistic people 18 years old or more or older, who can communicate, who suffer specifically from overwhelm. And Mark, by the way, he also created something. He's legally blind, sees only in one eye, and it's more of a tunnel vision. And he's always looking around and protecting himself and leaning in a direction as he was walking around. Added to that, the autistic overwhelm. And he created a subtle structure above his head that maps everything he looks at. It sort of forms a model of the 3D around him. And all of a sudden he was able to relax. He created something to help his brain functioning. So this stuff it sounds crazy. It sounds magical, but it's quantum magic. And from the standpoint of quantum reality, which creates anything, if you can access that place that creates anything, and you can work with the subtle body and emotions and psyche, etc., that's why it has these amazing results. Okay, next question, Michael.
All right. So next question is coming from Kit. Does this method, bracketing, work for healing physical injuries as well?
It's a great question. So yes, and I have used it for clearing pain. I've used it for a number of specific conditions for people, but I don't hold myself out as a physical healer. Certainly don't want to start working on people with diseases and whatnot. It's not my job. I'm more in terms of this psychological, spiritual, and whatnot. So what happens is, I was working on someone before I got involved with GMOs. I was a guest practitioner at healing centers, and we had advertised people looking for people who want to make a major life transformation in a single session. And a woman came and she had something she wanted me to work on. I don't even remember what it was, but I looked at her and I noticed through my bracketing awareness, I said, "What's going on in your throat?" And she goes, "Oh, that. Oh, yeah. I had my thyroid removed. I had cancer. But that's fine now." I said, "No, it's not." So we went in and she felt it. And I said, "Okay, go in and feel what's going on there. What's the emotions? Is it, describe it." And she goes, "Oh, that's my anger and frustration at my ex-husband." I imagine some hands are going up right now in the audience. So, and it was still there. So we did some things and cleared it. And so it was like, oh, completely different and changed and whatnot. Now, imagine for a moment that it was that she had a tendency to hold anger and frustration in her throat. And that is what caused the cancer. The subtle body, energy structures and whatnot, can create the physical body ailments. So if you deal with the subtle, the stuck emotions, the subtle body emotions, the subtle body energies and stuff, it could end up bringing health and healing to the physical. So I don't look to work on people's physical stuff. I'll work on the subtle energies which move much quicker than the physical. The physical moves slower than the subtle. I haven't mastered that by any means. I have a lot more expertise in the subtle, but the two are so related. I would say if you have an issue, bring quantum attention to it, and it will only have a positive impact. I can't say it's going to fully heal something, but I think put it as a tool in your toolbox.
How about if someone has an issue with their foot? I asked that I have a friend.
So what's interesting is we talked about generic quantum bracketing. The quantum has all these different qualities. In my book and in my trainings, we bracket for certain specific qualities. Bracket for purification. If I find a frozen in place subconscious part, I can bracket for acceleration and watch them grow in 1 or 2 minutes to an adult. You can bracket for prescription. What am I supposed to do here? Like if I were to look at a person's foot and say, oh yeah, I see some energy there, and it's like, so I could bracket for what's the prescription. The prescription could be more bracketing, but it could also be like something completely different, or giving information like, oh, I'm getting a sense that there's a need for this type of therapy or whatnot. So bracketing can be a foundational tool that can give direct transformation or lead a person to understanding. Sometimes someone's bracketing something and I might say, see if it has any roots or any layers or any that it's connected to something else. And they go, oh yeah. And they'll follow it down if they have that subtle perception and realize it's actually a whole structure in their system. And now their attention is into a whole structure. And their attention can go there, which possibly can go to a more fundamental level. So it's an ish answer to you, Michael. It's like yes, and.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. Any more questions? I have some questions if the audience is done, or if you wanted to continue on talking about anything else, you're free to do that as well. But I want to just give the audience a chance. If you have a question, you can go ahead and post it. Otherwise, or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. All right, and you can do that through the rest of this. Did you want to talk any further, or you want me to go ahead and ask some questions?
I have more things to discuss. I actually would like to hear your question first. Okay,
so are you doing something, or is the person doing something?
It's a good question. When I teach someone to do it, they can do it for themselves or other people, and I'm not involved. When I was working in the EEG lab, I consciously distracted myself, so I wasn't putting my attention on the person, literally looking around, and it was time, and I looked at them and I applied the quantum attention, and there was a change. And if the one that we did when the person was down the hall in the other room, she had no idea when I started and when I stopped. The neuro programmer, whatever his name, I don't know what his title is. He was watching the screen. I was looking at my watch and saying, okay, working on data issues now. And someone would write it down. He'd watch the screen. I would close my eyes. I'd bracket the subconscious. I'd see what was going on, hold my attention there, watch it release, watch it leave, maybe see the anger come up or the sadness come out or whatever. And then there was sometimes new light would come in or some new quality would come in, and there was more presence and expansion and then more breath, and then it was done. And that took 54 seconds, right? Mm-hmm. In that case, I'm doing it. She's not doing it. She doesn't know. When I start, when I stop, the brainwaves changed. The moment I started and ended and shifted, when I stopped, I looked the other way and the brainwaves changed again. So I can do it. I can also connect with a group. I've learned that more and more with groups. I can sense what's going on in the group and enhance it, because the quantum has all this capacities. It's way above my pay grade, but being a sort of a spotlight for the quantum, I could shine it where it will go. So the answer is both. When I was watching someone bracket, like I was earlier today, my intention was not to interfere with their work, but just to watch the emotional and energetic changes and see the speed of those. And there was a certain sense of like, oh yeah, now the quantum is being engaged. Watch the consciousness sort of settle back. When we worked with, I forget her name, where we took into a quantum suite, Deb.
Yeah.
I was watching. After we did this, I said, I'm going to do this in 2 parts. We're going to stop now. You're going to tell me what's different. She did. It was relaxed and all that. But I wanted to go back in there because I saw a structure in her mind/brain that was asking for my attention, and I put my attention on it and it just sort of dissolved. So that I did. So both.
So now if one, can something like this be quantified scientifically where like it can be researched and do research papers and then if so, with medications, with like SSRIs, there's a degree of placebo, for example. Can this be placebo? Or can some people have a placebo effect where because they believe in it, it's so? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. It absolutely can be quantified. My job right now is to get it out to as many people as possible right now through the website highestversionofyourself.com. But we're just sort of preparing for the book, Claiming Your Magic, and then making it available to large numbers in order to get a change in collective consciousness, which I will talk about in 5 minutes. It can be quantified. We started that with the EEG. We're looking for a protocol to figure out, well, which systems do you test? Where do you place the electrode or the sensors? What do you look at? And so I do feel like we're going to end up creating a nonprofit designed to evaluate and verify. I'd love to do that with the autistic community immediately, quantify, self-test, blood test, physiological tests before and after, because you need that in order for it to be adopted. Imagine for a moment that we had something that was deeply useful and life transformational that we could teach to all the caregivers and those that work with the autistic community or them themselves who work with the autistic community. Like, absolutely, we need to quantify it. And with all of the physiological tools, it's not difficult. And as far as quantification, it's interesting that Bruce Lipton, who wrote the foreword to my book, talks about when we did EEG years ago, we thought, oh yeah, the changes are in the brain. But there's a magnetoencephalograph where you put the leads away from the brain and you can measure the brainwave activity. So we're not limited to just the brain. We are in a field, but you can measure the field. Now, another way to measure the field is the effect on collective consciousness. So I'm going to use that as the segue to give the final good news that I said in the beginning that I wanted to give. For years, I was deeply involved with transcendental meditation and the advanced practice of the TM City program, which I love, recommend, but I don't teach it. What I'm doing now is not TM. It is not their work, but I gained a lot from it. I understood a lot from it. And one of the things I understood was the nature of collective consciousness. There was a Vedic scriptures that talked about in the vicinity of those in a unity experience like yoga, hostilities don't arise. There's more peace. And in the 70s, they discovered that in the cities, the cities that had at least 1% of the practitioners, 1% of the population practicing transcendental meditation, there was a phase transition and there was a decrease in crime and accident rate and hospital admissions. And they paired cities against each other for college student ages and socioeconomics. And sure enough, around 1% of the population practicing, there was a shift. Now, this is how systems work. A small percentage of the cells in the heart are the pacemaker cells. When they pulse together, the entire heart pulses. When a small percentage of iron filings become aligned, becomes a magnet. Systems are moved by small populations within the system, especially, and in this case, consciousness is a field and it's affecting an entire population. So there was an attempt to try and get 1% of populations practicing transcendental meditation, which is a huge goal because the numbers are astronomical when you think about the planet. Then Maharshi Mahesh Yogi, founder of TM, taught an advanced technique called the TM Siddhi program. And it was considered far more powerful in its influence on the quantum. And there's a under physics laws of nature called super radiance, or when certain particles in a field move together in a coherent way, their power is equal to the square of the number of particles. So if you just put on light, regular light in a room, and you have, let's say, 10 photons, the power is 10. But if it's a laser and you have 10 photons in coherent movement, the power is equal to the square of 10 or 100, or the square of 100 if there's 100 photons, 10,000. So there was a theory that on the level of consciousness, since the unified field carries some of those physics properties of the electromagnetic field where this thing works, that there should be an ability when there's coherence between people who are engaged in this quantum practice to equal the square of the power of the number of people. So what that means is instead of needing 1% of a population practicing TM at random times in their homes, if they were practicing together in one place, the more advanced technique, you'd only need the square root of 1%, which for the entire population is only 9,000 people, which means if you were able to get that number of people generating coherence in a single place, you would influence a society. Now, this is a great theory. They've had dozens of peer-reviewed published studies where they did interventions, sending groups into places, practicing together, watching the changes, the groups leave, it falls apart. And my favorite is one that they did with the Lebanese conflict. It was 800 some days over 2 years, and there were 7 courses of meditation for group practice during that 2.5 years. They were either close enough to have a predicted effect on that population, or were large enough to have an effect on the whole planet. And they looked at, okay, there were, let's say, 93 days during the practice and 700 and something days when there was no assembly. And they looked at and said, okay, what happened during those times when the assembly was there? There was like a 68% reduction in war deaths, a drop in casualties, a drop in the intensity of the war, an increase in the positive approach of the warring factions. And some of these were objective numbers and third-party evaluations. Now, could it have been by chance? There's a standard in science that if something could happen by chance, at least 5% of the time, then we can't say that you had a statistical significance, because it would have happened 5% of the time anyway. 1 out of 20 times it would have happened. So there's an understanding that if something has a probability value of less than 5%, 0.05, that's considered statistically significant. So they ran the numbers and said, how likely would this particular thing happen randomly? And it was 1 in 10 billion. It was 1/10 to the minus 19th. It was the most statistically significant social science research in the history of the planet. In other words, there was a definite relationship between the number of people practicing meditation at a distance, sometimes in another continent, and the war experience that was happening in Lebanon. And they weren't thinking about Lebanon. It was a collective effect. It's like they did a test when there was 3,000 of us practicing this technique together in UMass Amherst in 1979. It changed the brainwave coherence of people practicing meditation together in Iowa over 1,100 miles away. They put brainwave coherence checks between people and didn't tell them why they were testing it, didn't tell the operators why they were testing it, changed the times of their meditation. And when they were practicing, just at the time when people were in the most intense part of the practice, 1,100 miles away, it affected their brainwaves. Not because they were thinking about it. It's not intention. It's changing the field coherence for the collective. This gives me, and I know we're about to end, Michael, so I'm letting you know that I'm aware of the time.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
This kicked me out of the nest. It's like I was working on GMOs. It affects every living being, all future generations. It's foundational, the genetic integrity. We have gene editing that can replace nature, and gene editing of microbiome that can destroy nature. What am I doing talking about healing? Well, if we can increase this human quantum interface for the collective, if we can bring that evolutionary, purifying, integrating intelligence of the quantum into collective consciousness as a whole, that's worth our time. So if you want to be part of that experience and experiment and transformation, please join us at your highest version of yourself, highestversionofyourself.com. And then you can get on a list and we'll let you know when the book's coming out, which has all these different instructions and how-tos. And there's a bunch of stuff in our $10 a month community where you get a lot of pre-released aspects of the book, as well as instructions that are in the resources. So thank you, Michael, and thank you, Stephen Shore, for this. And thank you, everyone, for attending this lecture and this conference.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey, for sharing all that information and in your terms, coming out of the closet with this side of yourself. We really appreciate it. If we can unmute the audience. John might be in tech right now. Let's see here. You've had that experience before, so I'll just say thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey. That was great.
Thank you. Yeah. I feel it. I feel it.
Yes, we got some in the chat. If you wanted to say thank you to Jeffrey in the chat, I'm sure he can check that out.
Yeah,
there we go.
Thank you for caring about humanity.